Everybody, this is Dream, and today we're going to do our 11 game slate for the NBA. Before I get started, can you guys like, comment, and subscribe? It really does help the channel. Anyhow, let's get into the injury report. For the Hornets, Rozier is doubtful. For the Magic, Cole Anthony and Suggs are both out. For the Celtics, Grant Williams is out. For the Raptors, Otto Porter is out. For the Spurs, Vassell and Primo is out. For the Jazz, Sexton and Kessler are questionable. For the Nuggets, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Porter Jr. are questionable. For the Pelicans, Zion, C.J. McCollum, Herb Jones, and Alvarado are all questionable, and then Ingram is out. For the Rockets, Fernando's out. For the Trailblazers, Lillard is out, and for the Bulls, Levine is questionable. Obviously, as we get more information on those, that could definitely adjust the players, but I'm just doing this based on what the information is right now. So with that said, let's get into the point guards. So we're going to take a look at Shaedon Sharpe for the Trailblazers. Sorry. Now Sharpe is at $4,400, and he's actually played okay in the limited minutes he's played so far this season. He's usually getting around just under a point per minute, sometimes a little over, sometimes a little under. Assuming he does start today, he's going to be a great value play at $4,400. Then we're going to look at Trey Jones, whose price has come up some, but overall he's still a pretty good value. He's getting plenty of minutes, and that's what we need here. He's getting around a point per minute, so as long as he can continue that, he should be a pretty solid play and a good option here. Not really a value option anymore because of his price point, but because of his come up so much, but he's still good. Dennis Smith Jr. still looks pretty good today. He's still as long as injury systems Rozier's out, then he should be good to go here. And he's been hitting pretty high, almost to 40 fantasy points a game so far in his first two games as a starting point guard. Chris Paul looks pretty good today at a pretty decent price at $7,300. He's only one game so far this season he didn't do great was the first game, but overall he doesn't have to face a guy like Doncic again, at least not today against the Pelicans, so he should be in a great spot in this particular matchup, and his price is still pretty cheap. Scotty Barnes can play point guard and shooting and small forward actually on DraftKings, and his price point is too cheap for his production so far this season. As long as he doesn't get hurt, he should be good to go, and as long as he's looked to play a full complement of minutes, he should be fine. Tyrese Halliburton for the Indiana Pacers looks like he's going to be pretty solid today. His price point has stayed about the same last couple games, and he's been hitting right at the point that we need to pay off here. The real only concern is blowout potential here with Washington being pretty terrible, but I don't really expect that necessarily. And then Trae Young for Atlanta. His price point is still a little bit too cheap for his production so far this season. He does need 49 fantasy points to 5x, but he hasn't even had a giant game yet. He's been really solid. When I say giant game where he scores like 65 fantasy points, it's sort of kind of due, and Detroit's a good team to do it against. He did really easily score 35 points the last game against Detroit, and I expect him to have a similar outcome this game. Then we're going to look at Anthony Simmons for Portland. Now his price point has come up quite a bit, so that's a little bit of a concern, but he's still a good option on this particular slate with Lillard out. Josh Richardson's price point has come up quite a bit for San Antonio, but as long as he starts, he should have the ability to 5x on this at this price. It's not super ideal because he's a guy that doesn't typically play that many minutes, but especially so far this season. But as long as he can hit some threes and he gets some assists and stuff in this game, he should be good to go. Then Buddy Hield for the Pacers. He's another guy that looks pretty decent today against Washington. His price point's pretty cheap. It's actually gone down a little bit. And while he's been a little bit inconsistent to start the season, his floor is pretty good and his ceiling is pretty high. So I think he's got a good value play here. And then Marcus Smart for Boston. His price point's not super ideal, but he really hadn't gone up too much so far this season. He's a little bit boomer bust, but he's a pretty safe ceiling. And even though his floor is not particularly great, he does have a good ceiling. Then we have Franz Wagner for Orlando here. Now his price point has come up a little bit, But his production's been pretty good so far. He has a safe floor, but he also has a low ceiling, so he's kind of a good option if you just need it, need a safe play. Justice Winslow looks like he's a little bit too cheap for his potential today. He's played about the same amount of minutes so far in every game. I expect him to get a little bit of uptick on minutes for this game, and his production should be able to fit in the same, 15 to 25 fantasy points. So I think he's in a pretty good spot here. Gordon Hayward still seems a little too cheap for his potential in this particular matchup against Orlando. Not only that, but he's going to get plenty of shot opportunities. Assuming he can play 35 plus minutes, he should be good to go in this one, 2-5x with injuries there. Then LeBron is a guy that's interesting today against Minnesota. He should be able to dominate this team. The only real risk here is that the Lakers are trash and they may get blown out again. That's what happened against Denver, and he didn't play too deep in the game. So there's some risk there. The Lakers haven't won a game yet, and sometimes, he goes pretty hard. So it's just a matter of time before he gets a triple-double and pays off. His price point hasn't come up as much as I expected it to yet, so he's still somebody that's in play. Josh Hart looks pretty good today for Portland. He should get more shots as a result of the injuries. Even though his price point has come up a little bit, I still think he's a decent play, but he is a little bit boomer busty because a lot of guys on that team are kind of probably buying for those shots. Then we're going to look at Paulo Banchero. Now, I haven't really used him so far this season, but he's been pretty consistent so far, and he's got a good matchup against Charlotte, so he should be able to dominate this game. He's getting lots of shots and lots of minutes, and he's getting a lot of peripheral points as well, and so he should have a pretty good floor here and have a really high ceiling as well. Then we're going to look at Carl Towns, who's just a little bit too cheap for his potential. He hasn't been particularly great so far this season, but the last couple of games he's starting to get going. It's just a matter of who between him and Gobert get the rebounds and stuff. Unfortunately, it's a little bit of a logjam there, so it's hard to be super confident in either one. But because of the price points, they are both in play. Keldon Johnson looks a little bit too cheap for his potential in this one. Chicago does tend to be a good defensive team, but he's been playing pretty solidly. He hasn't really... His floor is pretty high in the low 30s, but his ceiling is also kind of capped out with his price point today. But overall, he's still a decent play in this particular situation. And then Joseph and Nurkic for Portland, he looks like he's in a solid play today. He should get a full complement of minutes tonight, and I suspect that he will play well in those minutes and get more opportunities with Lillard being out. They're going to have to diversify all the opportunities between the different players today, so he should get more upside. Wendell Carter Jr. seems like his price point has come up a little bit, but overall he's still a good value play. He's been playing pretty well. The only real risk here is that sometimes he doesn't get the double-double, and if he doesn't get that, it tends to hurt his potential in a particular game. But in this game, there should be plenty of shots and rebounding opportunities for him, and not too much of a risk when it comes to difficulty on rebounding. DeAndre Ayton's another guy I like here. His price point's just still a little bit too cheap, even though it's come up some. He's still a pretty good value here. He is at risk of boom or bust, but overall, we'll have to see who the Pelicans end up playing today, because that could affect him some, but he's still a decent option at this point. And then Podol for the San Antonio Spurs. He looks like he's in a good spot. He's been playing about 30 minutes a game, and he's been pretty safe. He isn't really a guy that's going to get a huge ceiling, but he does have a good floor, and so he's a pretty good safe pick, and he usually is undervalued on DraftKings. So that's what I have today for this slate. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.